What normally happens when I'm starting a new project is I start with the site plan. So there's a legal description of the property lines, which my mouse is following around. It's a little bit of a darker line on this site plan for one of my projects. Now, this is an as-built, which means that the house is already on the site, and now we're doing the final uh, survey to confirm to the municipality, the governing municipality, that the house does in fact satisfy the requirements in terms of setbacks from the property line. So if we take a look, these heavy lines represent the property line. In most municipalities in suburbia, which is where I live and where I work, and have side yard and front and rear yard setback requirements. You might be familiar with Brooklyn. Um, Certainly in New Jersey, there are certain parts where you don't have a side yard requirement. You can build right up to the property line, but in suburbia, for the most part, there are requirements, and they're different. Uh, Probably each municipality, governing municipality, has its own requirements. So we want to start out by just, let's see if we can zoom in here a little bit, and let's do it this way then. We just want to take a look at how that line is defined. And if you look, let's maybe we can go in a little closer here, that it has a angle of the property line and a distance. So we didn't start out in our class with a given site because for several reasons. One is I did not want you to be restricted by the design of your project. And number two, I wanted you to start on your project. There are plenty of things that we could have done that would have delayed the actual execution of your what I consider to be the most important part of the class. So anyway, we have these, and if we zoomed in on any one of those heavy lines, we would see that they are defined. So there is a point somewhere that the survey would identify as the starting point, and then that's a legal description. It might start out miles away, and the survey would say from this given benchmark, we would get to this point somehow. It would be legally defined, and that's the actual piece of property that well, you would own starts somewhere and then it's defined by legal description. Now, if we zoom in here, we would see that it's always backwards with this. Yeah, we would see that there's actually, because this is a cul-de-sac, this particular property line is actually radiused and it has information relative to that arc. Uh, but it's a specific piece of property that when you purchase, you own a very well-defined and articulated piece of property. Now let's take a look. This is the second part, is we want to take a look at what would be the setbacks. So here we look like we have a 30-foot side yard requirement. And if we come over here, it looks like we have a 14-foot side yard requirement here. So the total would be what, 44 feet? The minimum is 14 feet. And then the the maximum could be anything as long as you have a total of 44 feet for this particular piece of property. Now you'll notice here that the house jogs. This is a 4-car garage, which is pretty typical for my practice. When I started out, a 3-car garage was pretty typical, but now the houses pretty much have a minimum of 4, if not more. But if we zoom in here, we can see that the 24 feet, maybe that's it, 24 feet, which is really tight for um, coming in your driveway and turning into the into the garage itself with 24 or 24 and a half foot. That's pretty small. That's the minimum that's allowed. So we can see that the surveyor has identified the side yards um, and the rear yard, which is maybe here somewhere. Yep, setback 35 feet setback. So what the surveyor is doing now is confirming to the municipality that the house was built with the requirements. Now here, that's a 15-foot setback, so we're within that line there. And then if we come over here, the setback was looks like 30 feet. No, that's an easement, 30-foot easement there. Um, I don't see it identified, but anyway, that's what we want to do. So what we want to do today in our project is number one, put some property lines in. Number two, show the setbacks. And number three, you can see that the contour lines, we want to show these contour lines represent the change in elevation of the property. So if we look at this, it's 970. It's relative to sea level. So where this house is, we don't have much of a concern about the oceans rising and flooding this property. It's 970 feet above sea level. And if we look at this one, let's see, it's 969. So you can see that this is a higher elevation and it slopes in that direction. The property slopes in that direction. So let's get started. Actually working on our project. Well, let's see why that should not still be open. Okay, so this is your template that you started with, and we'll just work with that piece of property. Now, what is this? This is the, let's hover over that and it'll tell us, okay, that's the project base point, and I don't want to see that. So we know VG for visibility graphics, and we'll go down to the site. Just type S, take me right to the S's, and then maximize that out. And I have my project base point, don't want to see that, and my survey point, which I know from experience is also there. So I'm going to turn those two things off. I uncheck these and now I can't see them. And it should go away, and yes, it did. Now let's assume that this is your property. What we want to do is put in some property lines. Now, the actual way that we would do that is we would go to massing and site, and then we would click on property lines. And how do we want to enter the information? Well, normally we would do it by creating distances and bearings. And if we click on that, we get a property line, which gives us the ability to put the distance and the bearing information. And if we want to have another one, we can add another one and another one and another one. And then what I would do is take whatever the surveyor said on each one of their property lines, and I would put that information in. But we're not doing it that way today. What we're going to do is we're simply going to put a property line in by creating it by sketching. So we just want to make sure that the property line is bigger or is larger than the house is. And so I think this is the garage side. So we want to make sure we have adequate space here for the car to get in. So let's put that first one in here, and then we'll just come over here. And that's what you can do is just basically draw. Let's see if we can snap to that last one. There we go. That's the end point. And let's hit the green check mark. What do we have? Okay, so there's our property lines. I just sketched them in there. Now, what we want to do is identify the legal description of these. And so we would go to annotate, and we're going to put in what? Tag by category. Now, you're working with my template, and I'm going to tag this. I wanted to show, for some reason, I've added that. I think yours doesn't have the tag on it yet. But somehow my template now does have it. If you try to tag it and Revit tells you that it doesn't have that particular annotation tag, then we simply go over to Insert, and we can go to our Autodesk library, and we can search for it. So let's search for, let's look at the entire category of annotations, and let's see what they have there. So Revit's going to show us all of the annotations that it has. And one of those, let's go down to the site and see what they have in the site for us to select from. Let's see. Oh, we're almost there. Okay. H simplex. Okay, so it's didn't come up under. I'm going to cancel out of that because I forgot what it was called, but we're going to go back to annotate and we'll tag by category. I'm going to click on it here. And what is it? Property line segment and property. Okay, let's see what we do here. We're going to go back to insert. We're going to go back to that, and we'll just type property in the search box there. And we'll see what comes up. Property. Okay. I thought it would be listed under the site, but apparently it's not. Let's see what comes up under property. There we go. Property line tag, which is what we want. It has the angle and the distance. I already have it loaded, so I'm not going to load it again, but you could definitely do that. Oh, well, why not? Let's do it again. Come on. I'm not going to load it then. We'll just cancel out of that and see if it'll go there. Okay, so I have the tags there. So I don't want a leader because what I like to see, let me zoom in a little bit closer. I like to see the angle at the top and the distance at the bottom. So if I uncheck the leader, then I get the tag the way that I want. And all you have to do is click on it. I happen to probably have drawn perpendicular lines, but generally, it's possible that those lines would have an angle to them, but apparently I was very simple about it. Let's see what happens if we grab one of these. I'm going to edit the sketch, and I just want to drag this one over a little bit so that there's an angle to it. Then we'll trim extend. I still call it fillet from the old AutoCAD days. And we'll say okay to that. And you can see now that there is an angle to that property, but I have to move it now. So I can just grab these little arrows here and move it. I used the arrow key on my keyboard. Didn't seem to, yeah, that's good. Okay. So the second thing we want to do is put in our setbacks. Now, this is what I would do first of all. The very first thing that I would do before I even start to design a house for a client would be to put my property lines in. The second thing I would do is my building envelope, which is generally there is a distance that needs to be away. So let's say annotate detail line. What kind of a line do we want it to be? Well, I'd like it to be dashed. Overhead would be a dashed line. Let's see, or hidden would be that. And so let's go with hidden. See, although overhead would be fine because it's dashed, but we'll use that. Now, what is the offset? Well, I know I want to have at least really 30 feet is a good turning radius if we have a side entry garage. So I'm going to say that 30 feet is my offset, and then I'll just draw a line from here to here. I want that line to be, look at that. So my house is already not fitting in my side yard, but 25 is really acceptable. So let's put in a dimension here. I might not have my dimensions turned on. VG for visibility graphics. We'll go to the annotation category and see if dimensions are turned on. They are. Okay, so I should be able to see that. So we'll go to the quick access toolbar. I'm going to pick here and here. Where does it go? Right there. Okay, so now I have 30 feet, but I'm going to say, all right, click on the object that I want to Revit to move, and then I will click on the dimension and we'll make it 25 feet because that still works. All right, so we're better off here. Now let's assume that the particular municipality said if you want to have a side entry garage, it has to have at least 25-foot offset, which is really minimal. Definitely, it's not easy to turn a car in a 25-foot radius. Okay, let's do it on the back now too. So back to annotate detail line. It should default back to the hidden line, which I said it was. And let's say that's 50 feet for the rear yard. And it's your house and you're the architect. So I'm going to put a line in across here. Let's hit the space bar so that it goes on the right side. Ooh, look at that. Even 50 feet's not working for this house. So let's change it again. We'll put this dimension in here. But if it were 50 feet, then I would know that that would be my building envelope, but I'm going to change it. I'm going to make it 40-foot rear yard. So we click on the object that we want to move, and we say 40 feet. Okay, so now we have two offsets. So let's do the same. Let's say 25, let's say 16 feet. Annotate, detail line. Let's just double check to be sure that we get the line type that we want, which is hidden. And I'm going to say that it's 16 feet on this side. Okay, so we'll go here and here. And now I have a 16-foot in there. And my last one, let's say 30 feet in the front. Again, annotate, detail line. What kind of line is it? It doesn't hurt to spend a second to double check to make sure it defaults back. It's hidden. We're going to say that the front yard is 30 feet. It can be anything. You're the architect. You can make it anything you want. And if it turns out that it's in the way of your house, in other words, the house doesn't fit into your setbacks, then either move your property line or change your setbacks. So the next thing that I would do, assuming that there isn't a house here, first of all, because that would be the next step after we know what our building envelope is, then we would modify. I like to trim, extend, or fillet, and just clean that up so that all of the lines are like that. So here we have it. This is our, whoops, let's put a dimension in there too. So before I went any farther on this project, assuming that it was a real project, is that I would double check. I'd go back in and say, okay, does that match what the surveyor said? Does that match? Does that match? And does that match? And then the second thing that I would do is make sure that for the area that this house is being built, that the setbacks are exactly what they're supposed to be, that I haven't made any mistake, because I don't want to start designing the house and making it fit into a building envelope that isn't accurate, because I don't want to do work twice. Anyway, so now the first thing I would do is save that, because that's a lot of work. Spend some time saving that. The first thing I would do at this point is save it, because I've done my property lines and I've done my offsets. Now, the next thing we want to do after we've done that is put in some site. So back to massing and site. And now we're going to put in a toposolid. Let's see what our drop-down options are here. Create from sketch, create from import. Well, you could import a CAD drawing that might have more information on it, but we're going to draw it from a sketch, because we know that we're going to, well, we can pick lines. So let's do that. We're going to pick this line. We're going to pick this line. We're going to pick this line, and we're going to pick this line. Now, we could have drawn that easily, but remember that site that I showed you has that radius, the curve in the front, that arc. No, so we would just click on it to pick it. Now that's our site. We'll accept it. And then let's go. We also didn't pay attention, but we lucked out here because the reference level that the site was put in was at the grade. So let's look at what we did in 3D now. There's our site with our starting template that you started with. So now we start with that. It's got my outside walls for the house. It actually has more. We go up a little bit higher, we'll see that it has, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is just, well, that can't possibly be true. Getting a little bit off topic here, but that should be. Oh, okay. So let's take a look at the properties here. The height, it went up 8 feet 11 from the grade. So that's wrong. So we're going to move it back down to where it should be, which is at that, and there we go. I didn't see 2 stories of wall there, so I thought, oh, there might be something wrong here. Well, what it was the grade went in at the wrong point because we didn't, or I didn't, pay attention to the properties of that topo solid. Okay. Now, if we isolate that topo solid right now, come down to the eyeglass and say isolate category, we'll see that it's just a piece of ground. There's no basement opening in there. It's just the grade. Um, so let's reset the temporary height to see everything that we have. And we'll go back to that site plan. And let's take a look at that's the property line, which I don't want to see. I don't want to, if I'm grabbing the topo solids, I don't want to deal with the property line. So now I'll use this again and say we're going to hide that category. Let's see what happens. It hid the property line, but it didn't hide the text. So we'll click on that again and we'll say hide that category. And now when I click here, it will grab the topo solid. So let's click on the topo solid and let's say, let's modify the sub elements. So if we do that, what happens is there's little points here. Now we're saying that the elevation of the property, we want it to slope away from the front of the house. So that means that when it rains, the water will slope all the way back off of the property to whatever is in the back here. And what that means is if we click on one of these dots, and relative now, of course, to the grade, we want it to be lower. So let's make it -5 feet, okay? So it's going to change the elevation of that to -5 feet. And let's change this to -10 feet. Whoops, I didn't click on it. -10 feet. Okay. And these points, we can also add more, add points if you wanted to. But for purposes of this class, I'm very happy with just this. The elevation of these two, we're going to leave at 0. And let's go back and take a look at what happened here. What Revit did was it sloped the property. This is the front, and it sloped the property to the back. Let's spin it around a little bit and we can see a little bit better. See how the grade is sloping away to the back of the house? But in the process of doing that, it sloped the grade where the house is, and we want the grade at the house to be at this level, which is the grade level. So let's go back to the site plan. And we're going to, now we're going to add some points. So I pick the topo solid and we're going to say add points. Okay. And we want those points to be 0. So let's see what happens here. Right now, it's going to tell us what the actual elevation is, and we're going to change it. So we'll change that to, we want to change it to 0. So let's accept it, and then we'll click on it. Let's see what happens. Whoa. That was a mistake on my part. Okay, so we want to, again, I thought I paused the video just to make sure I was doing it properly. But anyway, we're going to click on this and we're going to say modify the sub-elements, which is right here. And we have one here already, so we'll click on it and it will tell us the elevation and we're going to make it 0. Okay. And then we're going to add another point over here, right at the intersection of that. But I want to change it to 0. And it's not, I'm not seeing that we can, let's try it. Nope. Okay. So I'm going to put the points all the way around. And these are the existing points according to the slope of the topography right now. And then we'll go back in and we'll modify each one. Okay, modify the sub-elements. We're going to click on that one and change it to 0. Then we're going to come over here and we're going to click on this one and we're going to do that all the way around. You can see the topography is changing a little bit. And changing them all to 0. And I'm going to show you in 3D what that looks like. And the reason I'm saying it's 0, 0 from the grade, the elevation is 0 from the grade. Okay. Now let's go back and look at it in 3D and see how it looks. Beautiful. Now the topography follows. Oh, look at that. That wall's in backwards. So we'll just hit the space bar. And now it's right. The brick's always got to be on the outside. Okay, so we look around. Look where the grade is. It's right where we want it to be. So that would be step 1. Step 2 is we're going to cut out the basement. That's what we want to do next. All right, I think I'm going to stop here and I'll come back and do the excavation on a follow-up video.